The desert stretched endlessly, the horizon trembling under the noon sun. Daniel Hayes said, "From above, they appear like a message carved into the earth." His words were heavy, almost reverent. The small plane rattled as it climbed higher, the dry wind hissing through every bolt and rivet. Rebecca Clark, sitting beside him, whispered, "How could people without flight imagine this?" Her skeptical tone masked awe. Below, the Nazca Desert unveiled strange geometric patterns, lines cutting across barren soil. Daniel leaned closer to the glass, his voice tightening. "No one truly knows why they did this. Was it worship, or a cry to the skies?" Rebecca shook her head, muttering, "Or something far beyond human reach." The engine growled, vibrations filling their bones as they traced the lines from above. Each new figure, hummingbirds, monkeys, trapezoids, seemed etched with deliberate precision. Daniel's eyes narrowed with obsession, a storm behind his calm exterior. He said, "I'll find the truth, even if it costs me everything." That night, the desert whispered under a cold moon. Daniel sat by a campfire, his notebook balanced on his knee. Rebecca said, "Your obsession will consume you." Her voice was flat, yet concerned. He traced the hummingbird sketch with his finger, flames casting restless shadows across his face. "These are not random," Daniel muttered, his voice trembling with conviction. The desert stretched silent, its lines unseen under darkness, but he felt them beneath the sand like a pulse. Rebecca looked away, hugging her coat tighter. "Maybe the answers should stay buried," she whispered, almost afraid of her own words. Daniel lifted his eyes, firelight flickering in them. "Truth never stays buried," he said, his tone sharp, resolute. The stars burned fiercely above, as if watching. The next morning, Daniel stood before a local museum, sun glaring off the faded sign. Rebecca followed reluctantly. Inside, dust clung to glass cases, holding fragments of pottery, etched with animal forms. Daniel whispered, "Echoes of the same patterns." Rebecca frowned, replying, "You're chasing ghosts." A curator stepped forward, a composed man in his 50s, graying hair, sharp suit. Dr. Alvarez said, "The lines are symbols of devotion, nothing more." His words were precise, final, like a blade. Daniel's jaw tightened, resisting. "Or perhaps," he said, "they were meant for eyes above the earth." Alvarez's eyes narrowed. "Dangerous ideas invite dangerous men." Rebecca trailed Daniel through narrow desert streets, their footsteps echoing off stone walls. Vendors shouted, selling trinkets shaped like animals. "This is madness," Rebecca said, irritation sharpening her voice. Daniel pressed on, eyes fixed ahead, muttering, "Somewhere here lies the first clue." She caught his arm, forcing him to stop. "You'll drag us both into ruin," she said, her eyes flashing with anger. Daniel pulled free, his determination burning. "The truth is never ruin," he said, his voice low but fierce. The crowd pressed around them, unaware of the storm building between the two. As twilight fell, Daniel climbed a rocky plateau overlooking the desert. Rebecca followed, breathless. The horizon burned crimson, fading into indigo. Daniel spread his arms toward the endless expanse, saying, "This land holds secrets written for the stars." Rebecca caught her breath, whispering, "Or illusions carved by desperate hands." Silence settled heavy, only the desert wind answering. Daniel's expression hardened, resolve etched into his features. "I'll uncover the truth," he declared, voice carrying into the night. From above, the faintest outline of lines shimmered, visible only in the dying light. The wind carried whispers through the desert, as Daniel and Rebecca stood near a cluster of locals gathered around a fire pit. An elder woman recited an ancient tale, her wrinkled hands gesturing to the stars above. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes sharp with curiosity, and asked, "What did they believe the lines meant?" The woman's voice trembled with reverence. "They are pathways for gods, drawn to guide them back to earth." Rebecca frowned, her tone edged with doubt, "Or stories twisted through centuries." The elder smiled faintly, her eyes clouded with memory. We carve for the sky, not for men, she said. Daniel's heart pounded, his mind racing. He scribbled notes rapidly, sparks from the fire dancing on the pages. Rebecca crossed her arms tightly, whispering, "Every myth hides more questions than answers." The desert silence deepened, as if even the night air listened. The morning sun bled across the desert horizon, casting long shadows over the barren earth. Daniel crouched beside a shallow trench, tracing one of the faint lines with his fingertips. "It feels like a pulse," he whispered. Rebecca stood behind him, her arms folded, eyes narrowed. "It feels like obsession," she said coldly. Daniel pulled a small compass from his pocket, aligning it with the line. His breath caught when the needle shifted. "Aligned perfectly," he murmured. Rebecca shook her head, muttering, "Even if true, it changes nothing." Daniel stood, his face lit by fire of conviction. "It changes everything," he declared, his voice breaking the desert quiet. The wind whipped around them, scattering sand like whispers of the past. Rebecca turned away, unwilling to meet the storm building in his gaze. Daniel entered the university hall with determination, footsteps echoing across marble floors. Rebecca followed reluctantly, her face guarded. Dr. Alvarez awaited at the podium, his sharp gaze fixed on them. Daniel said, "I've studied the alignments, and they're too precise to be mere ritual." Alvarez's lips curled faintly. "Your obsession blinds you," he replied. Rebecca glanced between them, unease etched into her features. Daniel slammed his notebook onto the table, pages fluttering. "These lines match star constellations," he insisted. Alvarez leaned forward, his voice cutting. "Dangerous speculation invites chaos. Leave this pursuit behind." The air grew heavy, silence pressing like a weight. Daniel's jaw tightened, his obsession undeniable. Rebecca whispered, "You're going to make enemies you can't fight." A figure emerged from the shadows of a narrow alley as Daniel and Rebecca passed through the market streets. The man's smile was disarming, his voice smooth. Miguel Torres said, "I hear you seek answers others won't share." Daniel stiffened, wary yet intrigued. Rebecca muttered, "Strangers in alleys rarely bring truth." Miguel extended his hand, his charm radiating. "Sometimes allies come in unexpected forms," he said. His eyes gleamed with secrets. Daniel hesitated, then accepted a folded piece of parchment. Miguel offered. "Follow where the lines converge," Miguel whispered. Rebecca pulled Daniel back, hissing, "You can't trust him." Daniel replied, his tone sharp, "And yet sometimes trust is the only choice." Miguel's shadow lingered as he disappeared into the crowd. That night, Daniel sat alone near the fire, studying the parchment under flickering light. Lines and symbols sprawled across the page, their meaning elusive yet deliberate. Rebecca approached quietly, her tone guarded. "He set a trap, Daniel." Daniel's eyes glowed with determination. "Or gave us the key," he whispered. He traced the convergence point marked on the parchment. Rebecca sank onto the ground beside him, shaking her head. "You'll follow this into darkness," she said softly. Daniel glanced at her, voice firm. "The truth always hides in darkness." The fire crackled, casting shadows like ancient figures dancing on the sand. Overhead, the stars gleamed, silent witnesses to their growing conflict. Dawn pressed a pale band over the Nazca plain as Daniel unpacked a weather balloon and a compact camera. Rebecca said, "If this fails, we waste a day and gain nothing." He smiled without warmth and tied the rig with careful knots. The balloon rose, the line singing as it climbed into colder air. Daniel said, "If the makers sought the sky, we must borrow its eyes." Rebecca shaded her gaze and murmured, "Height reveals, but it also deceives." The feed flickered onto a tablet, revealing a jagged convergence of lines near a low ridge. Daniel whispered, "There, a hub they ignored in every survey." Rebecca exhaled, her doubt bending into focus. She said, "Mark it, then prove it with ground truth." The breeze stiffened, and the balloon drifted, but the image sharpened as if the desert willed it. Daniel said, "They designed for distance, not for feet." The sun broke higher, and the lines glowed like scars reopening to speak. Inside a canvas tent, shadows pulsed to the rhythm of a humming generator. Daniel overlaid star charts on fresh aerial frames, his jaw clenched in thought. Rebecca said, "Test precession, not just pretty matches." He nodded and rotated constellations through centuries. The trapezoids began aligning with solstice azimuths like teeth in a locked gear. Daniel said, "Not perfect, but purposeful." Rebecca leaned closer and traced a faint offset. She said, "Builders compensated for horizon rise and wind drift." He smiled, surprised by her precision, and whispered, "You see it too." She pulled back and added, "I see a method that rejects accident." The tent canvas sighed as the wind moved across the plain. Daniel said, "If intention lives here, someone buried it beneath ritual." The generator sputtered, and the night pressed nearer around their fragile pool of light. The archive smelled of paper and sun-baked stone, its fans clicking with tired patience. Dr. Alvarez waited behind a stack of survey folders, his expression cut from marble. Daniel said, "Your published grid omits the ridge hub by 200 meters. Alvarez did not blink and replied, "Precision is a luxury the desert rarely pays for." Rebecca slid a photocopy forward and said, "Your assistant noted markers pulled after a private dig." Silence slid between them like a blade finding its seam. Daniel said, "Who moved them, and why?" Alvarez smoothed the page with 2 fingers. He said, "To correct errors before they mislead." Rebecca's voice cooled. She said, "Or to correct a story before it spoke." Daniel felt the old door of certainty splinter. He said, "Truth survives pressure, but not erasure." The fans kept clicking, counting lies and minutes alike. Miguel appeared with a grin and a folder heavy with glossy prints. Miguel Torres said, "I found a landing grid no one dares publish." Daniel's pulse kicked at the word landing, hungry despite caution. Rebecca said, "Show the provenance, not the smile." Miguel spread images of crisp lines nested like circuitry near a dry ravine. He said, "A friend in surveillance owed me a favor." Daniel traced a rectangle and asked, "Why do tire tracks run across a holy grid?" Miguel laughed softly and said, "Pilgrims drive everywhere now." Rebecca's voice hardened. She said, "These tracks cut before the lines, not after." Daniel's hope cracked and then held on anyway. He said, "We check the site and we measure." Miguel nodded, eyes bright with something that refused to name itself truth. They reached a roadside shrine where candles guttered in the wind, and a young woman watched the dunes as if waiting for a name. She stepped forward and said, "You chase lines that took my family." Daniel's shoulders lowered, as if she had pushed them down. Rebecca said, "Tell us what the lines took." The woman held a pendant, etched with a spiral, and a tiny bird. "Sofia Rogas said my cousin flew ultralights over the desert and vanished at twilight." Daniel whispered, "Did he follow a pattern to the ridge?" She nodded once, the motion brittle. Sophia said, "He believed the builders spoke in angles, and he answered with wings." Rebecca's voice softened. She said, "We will look where he looked last." Sophia stared at the horizon and added, "Find him, or at least the truth that kept him." The candles flickered as the wind exhaled, and the shrine seemed to lean closer to listen. The archive basement smelled of mildew and dust, its shelves stacked with neglected boxes. Daniel pried one open, his hands trembling as he pulled faded aerial maps. Rebecca said, "These were sealed away for a reason." He spread the maps under a dim bulb, eyes widening at markings of lines never published. "They cut them out of the record," Daniel whispered. Rebecca glanced nervously at the stairs, whispering, "If Alvarez finds us here, it will be over." Daniel traced a star symbol inked at the edge, his breath unsteady. "This is a hub older than the rest," he muttered. Rebecca touched his arm, urging restraint. "Secrets buried in basements are meant to stay dead," she warned. Daniel shook his head fiercely. "Truth is a root," he said, "and roots crack stone." The bulb flickered, as if the basement itself rejected their trespass. In Alvarez's office, heavy curtains blocked the morning sun, dust dancing in slivers of light. The professor sat with perfect calm, hands folded. Daniel said, "You buried maps that reveal more than ritual." Alvarez's lips curved faintly. "History needs protection from zealots." Rebecca's jaw tightened, her voice sharp. "You erased evidence for convenience." Alvarez leaned forward, his tone like a knife. "Do you think the world will thank you for tearing apart its myths?" Daniel slammed the desk, his voice shaking. "The world deserves the truth, not curated lies." Alvarez's eyes glittered coldly. "Then the world will destroy you for it," he said. Silence thickened like stone walls closing in. Rebecca whispered, "This fight is larger than us." Rebecca sat by the fire pit outside their tent, her eyes reflecting flames. Daniel studied star charts again, shoulders tense. She said, "You're chasing ghosts carved in dirt." He looked up, voice soft but burning. "And yet you see them now too." She turned away, silence pulling at her lips. "Maybe I see the danger clearer," she admitted. Daniel placed the parchment between them, marked with symbols they uncovered. "Danger is only a wall," he said, "and walls fall when you push." Rebecca exhaled, her resolve thinning. "If you're right," she said, "we walk into something meant to stay buried." Daniel's hand trembled, but his tone was unyielding. "If truth dies in shadows," he whispered, "then so do we." In the ruins at the edge of the desert, the informant appeared cloaked in shadows, face hidden beneath a wide hat. He spoke softly. "The lines are doors, but only for those who read their angles." Daniel stepped forward, demanding, "What doors, and where do they lead?" The informant handed a folded map, voice cryptic. "Follow convergence near the plateau, but beware who else follows." Rebecca hissed, "Why speak in riddles?" The informant tilted his head. "Answers too clear will break you faster." Daniel's hand shook as he unfolded the map, etched with marks unseen before. "Why help us?" he asked. The informant stepped back into the ruins, his final words drifting. "Because the secret already hunts you." At a roadside chapel, candles burned low, their wax pooling in silence. A grieving farmer sat before them, tears cutting lines into his dust-streaked face. He said, "My brother vanished chasing the plateau lines." Daniel's chest tightened as the words sank in. Rebecca asked softly, "When did he disappear?" The farmer lifted a photo, hands trembling. He believed the lines spoke to him, and the desert answered by taking him. Daniel's eyes darkened. "His loss is not in vain. His path may guide ours." Rebecca whispered, "Or warn us to turn away." The farmer shook his head. "Truth devours those who seek it without mercy." The candles flickered, casting fleeting shapes across their faces. The desert plateau stretched beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds, the first drops of rain darkening the dust. Daniel paced along a jagged geoglyph line, his boots grinding into the earth. "It all connects here," he muttered. Rebecca followed reluctantly, arms wrapped against the chill, her voice cutting through the wind. "Every connection pulls you further from reason." Daniel stopped and held up the parchment Miguel gave, comparing it with the shifting horizon. His jaw set. "They marked convergence for a reason," he said. Rebecca whispered, "Or they lured you to an end." Thunder rolled, vibrating through the earth. Daniel's eyes burned with obsession. "If it breaks me, let it," he growled. Rebecca's voice softened despite herself. "If it breaks you, it breaks me too." Lightning tore the horizon, illuminating the lines like veins of fire. At dusk, they sat beside Sophia at her modest home on the desert's edge. A faded photo of her missing cousin lay on the table. Sophia's eyes shimmered with grief. "He followed the lines into the storm," she whispered. Daniel leaned forward, voice low. "Did he leave anything behind?" She placed a weathered journal on the table. Rebecca opened it cautiously, pages filled with sketches of lines merging with constellations. Sophia said, "He believed the plateau hid a chamber, a door to the past." Daniel's breath quickened, his eyes scanning page after page. "He found what I've been chasing," he said. Rebecca warned, or he found death in shadows. Sophia's voice broke. If you follow him, take care not to vanish too. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the restless desert wind. Back in camp, Miguel arrived unannounced, his leather jacket damp with rain, folder clutched tightly. He grinned slyly. Proof, Daniel, satellite captures that show an entrance beneath the plateau ridge. Rebecca stiffened, her voice sharp. You arrive with evidence too easily. Miguel chuckled. Truth comes to those who know where to look. Daniel grabbed the images, heart racing as he traced the dark rectangular void in the soil. This is it, he breathed. Rebecca shook her head, muttering, It feels like bait. Miguel's grin widened. Bait is only dangerous if you don't take the hook. Daniel's obsession flared, his voice breaking. Then I'll take it. Rebecca's eyes hardened. And if you drown, we drown with you. Miguel stepped back, shadows flickering across his smile. Rebecca stood outside the tent, staring into the restless desert night, her arms wrapped around herself. Daniel joined her, journal under his arm. Every path points to tomorrow, he said. Rebecca's voice trembled, caught between fear and defiance. Tomorrow could be our last. Daniel turned, his face carved by firelight. The lines will reveal what they were meant to. She looked at him, her expression torn. If you fall, I'll have nothing left, she whispered. He placed a hand on her shoulder, softer than his words. You'll have the truth, he said. Silence stretched as the fire crackled. Rebecca whispered, Truth doesn't keep you warm in the dark. The desert wind howled, carrying echoes of forgotten voices. The following dawn, Daniel and Rebecca stood at the edge of the plateau, backpack strapped tight, storm clouds breaking into pale light. Sophia handed Daniel her cousin's pendant, her voice unsteady. Carry him with you, so he won't vanish twice. Daniel nodded, eyes glistening. I'll bring back his truth, he said firmly. Rebecca whispered, And what if truth is a tomb? Daniel closed his fist around the pendant. Then, I'll still open it. Miguel lingered nearby, leaning against a rock, his smirk faint but watchful. Sophia said softly, The desert never gives without taking first. Daniel glanced at Rebecca, resolve blazing. Then it will take nothing I'm not willing to lose. They turned toward the ridge, lines etched faintly in the dawn light, leading them deeper into the unknown. The plateau ridge loomed ahead, jagged stone catching dawn's first light. Daniel stopped suddenly, his breath ragged, as a figure stepped from the shadows. It was Luis Moreno, his former colleague, eyes cold. Rebecca gasped, whispering, Luis, you were supposed to be dead. Luis smirked, voice low and bitter. You left me behind, Daniel. Now I hold the key to the lines. Daniel's chest tightened, his voice trembling. You betrayed everything we worked for. Luis stepped closer, his expression twisted. I betrayed nothing. I chose survival when you chose obsession. Rebecca's voice cracked with anger. You're the reason others vanished. Luis ignored her, eyes locked on Daniel. This truth belongs to me, not you. Daniel's fists clenched, grief and rage colliding in silence. Deeper along the ridge, they discovered a cave mouth, carved with faint spiral symbols. Daniel's pulse surged as he traced the edges with his fingers. Luis said coldly, Not all doors are meant for you. Rebecca glared at him, her tone fierce. You've hidden this from the world. Luis laughed darkly. The world would bury me if I told them, so I bury the truth instead. Daniel turned sharply, voice echoing. Truth doesn't belong to one man. Luis's eyes narrowed. But it can be stolen, Daniel. And I stole it first. Rebecca stepped between them, her voice steady. Then, we end this here. The wind howled through the cave, carrying whispers of something ancient waiting within. As night fell, Miguel arrived, his smile thin and mocking. Looks like family reunions bring out the best in men, he sneered. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. You knew about Luis all along. Miguel grinned, tilting his head. Secrets are valuable currency. I only spend them when it suits me. Daniel's voice roared, "You led us into this trap." Miguel raised his hands casually. "No trap, just business." Luis chuckled bitterly. "Business in truth, business in lies, it makes no difference." Rebecca whispered, "It makes all the difference when people vanish." Miguel's grin faltered slightly, but he recovered with a shrug. Daniel's eyes burned. "Then tonight we stop the lies, no matter what it costs." The air grew heavy as storm clouds gathered overhead. A cry shattered the night as Sophia rushed into camp, clutching a torn piece of fabric. Her eyes burned with terror. "The cave took another," she cried. Daniel grabbed her shoulders. "Who?" She trembled. "A guide who followed the markings. He vanished into the dark." Rebecca whispered, "The desert keeps claiming." Luis sneered, "And yet you walk willingly into its jaws." Sophia sobbed, holding the fabric close. "My cousin died here, and now another joins him." Daniel's voice was steel. "Then it ends with me. I'll go in." Rebecca's hands gripped his arm. "Not alone." Luis muttered under his breath, "Some sacrifices are necessary." Miguel smiled faintly in the firelight. "The desert always hungers." The cave's mouth seemed to yawn wider, shadows writhing in silence. At dawn, they stood before the cave, the rising sun painting blood-red streaks across the sky. Daniel held Sophia's pendant tightly, whispering, "For those lost." Rebecca's hand brushed his shoulder. "And for those left." Luis stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Enter, and you risk unleashing what must remain hidden." Daniel turned, fire in his eyes. "You hid truth to serve yourself. I reveal it to set it free." Miguel smirked, leaning against the rock. "Freedom, death. It's a thin line in this desert." Sophia's voice broke as she said, "Bring him back, if not his body then his name." Daniel stepped into the shadows, Rebecca close behind. The cave swallowed them, the outside world dimming. Luis muttered, "And so it begins." The cave air was thick, carrying echoes of dripping water and whispers of stone. Daniel lit a torch, its glow revealing spirals carved deep into the walls. Rebecca whispered, "These markings, they match the constellations." Daniel's breath shook. The builders weren't just drawing on the desert. They built a map beneath it. From the shadows, the informant appeared, voice calm. "You stand at the threshold of truth, but truth devours those unready." Rebecca snapped, "Then why lead us here?" The informant tilted his head. "Because the lines were never for gods, they were for men who dreamed of touching the stars." Daniel's grip on the torch tightened, his eyes burning with both fear and wonder. The chamber widened into a vast cavern, its ceiling painted with faded celestial murals. Daniel raised the torch higher, whispering, "A sky buried underground." Rebecca's eyes widened. "This is what they died protecting." Luis stepped from the darkness, his voice sharp. "And I'll make sure it stays hidden." Daniel's voice thundered, "You hoarded truth, Luis, but it belongs to all." Luis sneered, pulling a pistol from his jacket. Rebecca froze, whispering, "Daniel." The informant's voice cut through. "A weapon cannot silence the stars." Luis's hand trembled as the torchlight flickered across his face, rage and desperation colliding. Luis's hand shook as the pistol glinted in the light. Daniel stepped closer, voice steady. "You're afraid truth will erase you." Luis shouted, "It will erase everything." Rebecca's voice broke through the tension. "No, lies erase, truth endures." Luis aimed at Daniel, but his breath faltered. Miguel emerged behind him, grinning. "Seems the keeper of secrets bleeds like the rest." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You played us all, Miguel." Miguel smirked. "And yet here we are, exactly where I wanted you." The cavern trembled faintly, dust drifting from the murals as if the earth itself resisted the conflict. The cavern roared as part of the ceiling cracked, stones falling around them. Luis stumbled, dropping the pistol, his eyes wild with fear. Miguel darted forward to grab the weapon, but Daniel kicked it aside, his voice fierce. No more lies, no more traps. Rebecca pulled Sophia close as she entered the chamber, clutching her cousin's pendant. Sophia cried out, "This place is his grave and his truth." Louis staggered, clutching his chest. "The truth will bury us all," he gasped. Daniel raised the torch toward the murals, the light igniting constellations carved in fire. "No, Louis," he said, his voice steady. "The truth will set us free." The group stumbled from the cave into dawn, the desert stretching endlessly. The sun rose, painting the lines below in firelight. Rebecca whispered, "We survived, but at what cost?" Daniel held the pendant high, his eyes wet. "The truth cost blood, but it breathes now." Sophia wept softly, whispering, "Then my cousin's voice is no longer lost." Miguel leaned against a stone, his smirk gone, replaced with emptiness. Louis sat broken, staring blankly at the desert. The informant's voice carried softly, "You open the door. What you do with it will define you." Daniel turned toward the horizon, his expression a mix of triumph and sorrow. "Then we carry it," he said, "because truth demands a weight."